Welcome to a bonus episode of The Evolution of Horror. My name is Mike Munzer, and as ever, I am your host. This weekend sees the release of the first major horror movie of 2026, Nia DaCosta's Bone Temple. This is, of course, the sequel to 28 Years Later, the Danny Boyle film, which dropped last year. This is the next chapter in that saga, written by Alex Garland. And what you're about to hear is a spoiler-free, in-depth discussion of the film, which I'll be having with Ben Travis later on in the episode. But first of all, you can hear my interview with the director, the brilliant Nia DaCosta. Nia DaCosta obviously directed the Candyman reboot a few years ago. She's also had success with the brilliant Heather last year. And now she's here to talk about Bone Temple, about taking on the mantle of the 28 Years Later universe from Danny Boyle, but also making it her own. This interview is pretty much spoiler-free. It will contain a few minor details of the plot, but nothing that will be spoilerific. So please enjoy my conversation with Nia DaCosta. Nia DaCosta, hello.
Hi, how are you?
I've literally just come out of the film today.
Oh, lovely.
Absolutely loved it.
How are you doing?
I'm a little bit shaky, but I'm hanging in there. Tell people, what can they expect from Bone Temple? How does it differ to the last movie we got in this franchise?
Well, what was really fun about this one is that I get the chance to expand on Kelson's life and more of the Jimmys in this film, and it really becomes sort of like Jimmy's versus Kelson with poor Spike in the middle. So that dynamic's really fun. So that's what you can expect going into this one.
What were your kind of initial thoughts on this franchise generally? You know, what was your relationship with the original movie? Were you a fan?
Huge fan. Like, it's one of my favorite films, but also definitely one of my favorite horror films. And actually, it's funny, my producing partner, I had to tell her about this because I was, wow, that's crazy.
Oh, wow.
Sorry, there's a poltergeist in the lights, guys. I was telling her, hey, I think I'm going to go do the 28 Years Later, da-da-da-da. And she was like, oh, 28 Days Later. She hates horror, by the way. She was like, oh, that movie made me want to make movies.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because it's so beautiful. And I think it's beautiful, it's scary, it's terrifying, and it's thrilling, but it's also so artful and character-driven. And it feels special because of the way Danny directed it and because of what Alex wrote. So yeah, I had really great feelings about the movie.
Yeah, how does it feel coming into, I guess, what is essentially a kind of middle chapter of a trilogy, right? That was the idea. How was that? That must be quite challenging in terms of kind of, I guess, making it its own thing as well.
It was, honestly, no, it wasn't. Like, I didn't think about it in that way. I think maybe because I was just focusing on this one. Yeah. And so I was thinking super specifically about the arcs that start and end in this film. And I got to really, make it my own. And so with this film, I really thought of it as Kelson's point of view and his world, his beautiful, bucolic peace that he's found. And then the Jimmys, this like erratic, sadistic chaos that they've fostered and found, and how those two things feel really different, and they could feel different visually, and how when they clash, it causes fireworks, essentially. And so that's really what I focused on and how I approached directing it initially.
Love that. Tell me a little bit about the kind of visual choices, because obviously the Danny Boyle had this very specific kind of visual mode of telling the story, particularly in last year's movie, right? Like, how much of that did you kind of pick up and run with? How much of it were you sort of able to kind of go with your own kind of visual direction compared to kind of carrying on what Danny Boyle had set up, I suppose?
Well, I was 100% able to go in my own visual direction. Like, it's really, but also it's because this is how I go into every film. It's, I say, here's what I'm gonna make, and then if they're into it, cool. And I think what I said I was gonna make felt unique enough, but also within the same family enough that they were like, oh great, go off and do that thing. And so I really was given license to make my own film, and I was really supported by the producers, and which is like such a great place to be, especially when the producers are the ones who it's their baby, you know? Yeah. And so for them to like really put their faith in me and to believe in what I wanted to do was really great. And I also think like all of my choices and what I wanted to do stylistically came from what was in the script and the themes that I was seeing in the script. And so Kelson's world had to be measured and still and beautiful. And like, you know, we have a lot of wides of like nature, and you hear the insects, and it's really green, and there's like the red poppies. It's like beautiful. And then you have the Jimmy's world, which is like much more dark. It's less well lit. It's contrasty, a lot more cutting, a lot more movement of the camera. And then slowly those worlds bleed together once they start to overlap. And I think, you know, that's just like to have a theory for why you're putting the camera where you're putting it and why you're doing what you're doing, I think helps two director producers, Danny and Alex, be like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense, go for it.
Were you using kind of similar sort of technical sort of camera techniques as Danny with the iPhone rigs and all that stuff? No.
I heard that Anthony Dadmantle, who's amazing, he whose work I'm obsessed with, but he said something, I think, on Roger Deakins and James Deakins' podcast about how he'd be trying to figure out like how to get this iPhone to do what he wanted. Then down the hall, Sean Bobbitt, my DP, was just like working on an Ari, with like a beautiful digital camera, and I was just like, oh, but obviously the work that he did was phenomenal. But I knew I was going to shoot on an iPhone. Like, I'm not really curious about that technology for film.
Yeah.
But I love when other people do it and do it well, like Danny did, and like the way Soderbergh does. But I love my Alexa, my Alexa 35, my Alexa 65, and I really love glass, and I love, Sean and I were super specific about what we were going to do, and how we're going to shoot it, and the kit we were going to use, and we used the same key grip and Steadicam / Trinity operator, so it makes me able to go, hey, what if we did this? What if we changed the rig to be like this? Can we build something different? And then we just kind of go from there.
So you said you had this kind of vision for how you wanted to bring the themes, visually to the screen.
Yeah.
What would you say are the main themes of this particular movie?
Yeah. I mean, I think it comes from the end of the first film where Kelson goes, memento mori, memento amoris, remember you must die, remember you must love. That's his outlook on life, despite all of the chaos, or maybe because of it, the meaninglessness of life that we're, spinning around in a different universe on this petri dish of a planet. He's like, you can lose your mind and start flaying people, or you can lock arms and say, we have each other, and that's beautiful. And I think, and that's why I think the movie's hopeful. But that's in stark contrast to what the Jimmys are doing and how they've chosen to live. So I think like just looking at those two different points of view and this idea of choice. And because there's a lot said in like these kinds of films where it's like, oh, the humans are scarier than the monsters, but they're scarier because they're choosing to do terrible things.
Absolutely.
As opposed to the infected who are diseased and unwell. They need a doctor.
Poor Samson. I mean, I kind of fell a bit in love with Samson in this movie.
I mean, yeah, he's so lovable. He's great, and he's got a lot going on.
Exactly. Yeah. Whereas Jimmy, I mean, Jack O'Connell, tell me a little bit about kind of working on that character.
Yeah.
Because he is possibly one of the scariest things we've seen in this kind of universe so far, I would say.
1,000%.
Yeah.
He's something I'm finding really interesting is like the mundanity of evil.
Yeah.
And he's that, but also like the camp of evil and the silliness of evil. And he's a cult leader essentially, and so he had to be incredibly charming and kind of funny. But also he gets these like young people to sadistically torture people for his religion, for Saint Nick, for his dad, or what his whole thing. And so putting that together, I think Jack and I really went with what we got off the page, which is like this. There's a humor to him. There's also this like this deep darkness to him, and also there's a scene in the film where you're like, oh, I see the human actually. I see the kid that we remember from the first film.
Yeah.
So we kind of took those cues and just tried to figure out, okay, what puzzle pieces need to be bigger or smaller so they all fit into one. And that was the work of bringing Jim Crystal to life.
Yeah, and I suppose there's that beautiful contrast between his character and then Rafe's character, in this. And again, like, how did you find that kind of? You talked about already that kind of balance, I suppose, between the kind of calmness and the chaos. Is that ever a kind of worry when you're making a genre film, essentially, where horror audiences are expecting a horror movie, right?
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the thing is, I just really took my lead from the script because I was just like. A huge fan of 28 Days Later. Amazing horror set piece in that film. Truly terrifying from beginning to end. It's like that balance of, it's a kind of classical horror balance of like horrifying scene to emotional scene,
Yeah.
What I thought was so cool about what Alex was doing with this one, he was like, let me shift that balance a bit from movie to movie. And I just trusted that because I don't know, like I can rewatch 20 Days Later and have that exact same experience.
Yeah.
I like that he's like, let's try and do something slightly different, but stay in the same world and in the same feelings and in the same themes, I think, from the first film. That being said, I did say, oh, maybe just one more little horror sequence here, please, because I also am very aware of genre convention and audience expectations, and I did not want to disappoint.
Love that.
Yeah.
I mean, it is such a shock at the end of the previous movie when you see that gang of Jimmys, I think. How familiar were you with the Jimmy Savile, backstory, I suppose, to these characters?
Well, it's not their backstory, to be clear.
Well, true.
But I was very familiar with Jimmy Savile because I was living in the UK when
Right.
when everyone was thankfully revealing all of the horrific things he'd done. But yeah, so it was just really interesting because in the world of our film, everything shuts down in 2001.
Yeah.
And also this character, as a person, he kind of shuts down at like the age of 8. So all of his references, like he never gets to watch The Sopranos, you know what I mean? Like all of his references are Teletubbies and all these other childlike things. We have a Tamagotchi on Jack as well. And this character is so much about the corruption of childhood and innocence and the perversion of it. And so I think, he's just a part of that pastiche. Like they really go at the Teletubbies in this movie.
Oh my God.
I feel a little bit bad for the
I was going to say, were you familiar with Teletubbies? Was that a thing?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we have the Teletubbies in the U.S. because I watched them, but I also, like, my dad's from here and my family we're mostly Jamaican, but peripherally British. Like, I grew up watching EastEnders.
Okay,
and
amazing.
so I was like, maybe I watch it because we were watching like British TV or something, but yeah, I didn't like Teletubbies, I'll be honest with you. I thought they were weird. I thought it was weird that they kept wanting to repeat the same videos.
Really weird.
I didn't like that baby son.
Really weird.
That made me stressed out.
Yeah.
And also, I frankly probably was just too old for it.
Yeah.
I think it was for babies, but yeah.
It was a pop culture moment, though, wasn't it?
It really was. And in retrospect, I'm like, they were kind of lit. They were like, they were just like doing their own thing, free, true to themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What's the one with the little purse?
Well, I know. Yeah, they were all a bit fluid. It was amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, and obviously it is kind of crucial to this particular story that kind of culture stopped in the early 2000s. But I think there's something interesting too about nostalgia at the moment, right? It feels like that's also really capturing a zeitgeist right now, is that I feel like nostalgia, and maybe even particularly 90s nostalgia, feels incredibly popular. Why do you think that is at the moment?
I mean, I think we kind of go in 30-year cycles.
Right.
My last film is a film called Hedda, and it's set in the 50s.
Yeah.
And we were trying to figure out the interior design, and my production designer was like, well, there's the new stuff in the 50s, but then also Art Deco from the 20s was coming back around. And then I remember in the 90s, a lot of like the stuff from the 50s was coming back around, like black lacquer and leopard print. And I think just like, we just go through those cycles where we forget a thing and then we come back to a thing.
I suppose especially right now with everything so scary in the world, there is also this feeling, isn't there, that the 90s were a kind of relatively sort of, I guess, more peaceful time than right now as well. And
well, they definitely were like, they felt more like you can hold them in your hand a bit more.
Yeah. There's something that Rafe's character says in this movie about how what he remembers of the old world, right? And he says something about like there was a kind of stability.
Yeah, the foundations, like, yes, he says, yes, there were dramas, but the foundations felt unshakable.
And I think, I don't know, watching this early January 2026, there is something quite scary about, I don't know, kind of that feels less stable right now than ever as well, I think. And I think that's what's these movies do quite cleverly, right, is there is something that feeds into where we are right now, I think.
Yeah, I think it feels like, because obviously there were always like horrifying things happening all over the world, but I think there was an expectation of who was doing the horrifying thing and how they were doing it.
Yeah.
And they're often the same people. And now we're in a place where it feels like, oh, like this could actually get so much worse. And it's the same people doing terrifying things, but in a way that we've never quite seen before. So there's a lack of predictability to it.
Yeah.
So it does feel like the seams of the world are kind of falling apart at the moment.
It does. It does. And so I think there's something quite, I guess this is what horror does, right? There's something quite cathartic about it whilst also being quite scary at the same time.
And it reflects what we're anxious about.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you've done, with Candyman, I guess there was a kind of similarity in that you were picking up a property from the 90s and then making it your own. How similar was that experience to this one? Did this one have particular new challenges in terms of taking on an existing property, I suppose?
They were so different.
Yeah.
Such different. Because I mean, with this one, I was literally working with the people who created the world, and so I just had them, and also like we had a script that was just, it was there, it was done. And I didn't have to co-write, I didn't have to like do any like triage or anything like that, it was just like, oh, the script is basically perfect. And I did, of course, I was like, can I get a little bit of that or this, but like, it's just what you would do as a director with a writer, and Alex was super open and also super clear on what it was, and so things that I asked for that he was like, that doesn't work, I was like, cool, great, so it was like really collaborative, which is wonderful. But the world is so different, and like the Candyman world, which I love, like that was all about subverting and changing and expanding and figuring out like how to make that something that felt even more universal, in a way that was really nice. Like with the expansion of the Dana Robitaille story and the Candyman as opposed to just one Candyman. And then this one's also expansive, but in a way that feels sort of still inside of what that first movie was setting up. So
For sure,
yeah.
How, the violence goes hard in this movie, right? Again, incredible, shocking. How far?
I didn't even realize how. I guess we wanted impact, but people have been really shook.
Yeah. And I don't know whether that's maybe just tonally or whether it was because of just like the gore, but how hard were you able to go? Was there ever any pushback on those scenes, of particularly the kind of torture scenes and everything?
I would say the filmmakers there's no pushback whatsoever. I was like kind of like pushing back. I was like, because I love gore, but I also think I approach it, like I said this in an earlier one, it's sort of like a sex scene. It should earn its place. It can't be gratuitous.
Yeah.
But everyone loves watching sex, so it's like, I love violence. So I'm just sort of like, it has to make sense and has to be there for a reason. And because this movie is about the beauty and the bloodshed has to be as intense as the beauty is intense for a character like Kelson. But of course, like, we had to have an R rating.
Yeah.
And you also have to make sure the audience, while there's impact, they're not like turning away or leaving. Obviously everyone has a different barometer for what they can handle. Mine's pretty high. But you have to be in conversation with the people you're making the movie for in that sense. So we're always modulating.
Can you go as a horror viewer?
Yeah.
Do you scare easily these days, or are you pretty kind of hardened to that stuff?
No, I scare as much as anyone else. That's why I like horror. I like being scared. Like I have the feeling of like I don't like roller coasters really. Mm-hmm. And when I'm forced to by a friend who says you have to go on this roller coaster, as soon as I lock in, I have this feeling of like, oh God, what have I done? And then as I'm going up the thing, I'm like, oh God, what have I done? And that's exactly how I feel when the trailers are playing before a movie that I think is really going to scare me, where I'm like, oh God, okay, well, here we go. I love it. I love being scared, but I'm also nervous.
Do you have anything in particular that gets you? Do you have a limit in terms of what horror you can handle? You said you're pretty good with kind of gore and body horror then.
Yeah, gore is fine. The grossest thing in this movie to me is the brains in Samson's beard.
Yeah.
That disgusts me. Like when I was watching it, I was like, oh, like literally makes my stomach turn. Everything else, I'm like, okay, cool. Like, should you take off more skin there? And like the vomit, like, I don't care about that stuff, but the beard is really gross.
Yeah.
And limit. Yeah, I think I'm more... Things that are like morally disturbing, like child murder, for example.
Yeah.
I guess all murders morally disturbing, but like stuff that's like actually like spiritually harmful.
I think that's it, isn't it?
What it is, yeah.
Maybe that's what it is about this story compared to the previous ones where we're dealing with infected who are essentially zombies, right? Whereas this one, I definitely had that feeling of like you're going over the roller coaster at the beginning of this movie when the fight in the swimming pool happens and you're like, oh my God, there's something just so much more human.
Because you're like, why the hell is this the choice that these people have made?
Right.
Why are they living their lives like this?
Yeah.
Whereas if you're infected, you're diseased. You need help.
Yeah.
He needs a therapist, but there aren't many. NHS isn't around.
Yeah, exactly. How much of the sort of the gore, the body horror stuff was done kind of in camera? Was a lot of that practical when you were shooting it?
Almost all of it.
Yeah.
Almost all of it. And then we had our amazing VFX team at Union just making it all seamless. But yeah, I remember the first time I saw the skinned prosthetics, I was like, this is dark.
Dark.
It was the first time I was like, oh, right, that's what I'm making. Yeah, I was like, shit, it's crazy.
It reminded me of the French film Martyrs. Have you seen that? That is one of those.
It is
one of the most extreme things I've ever seen, and this came close to that. So, that's a compliment.
Crazy.
Yeah. Is there anything you can tell us about what comes next beyond this movie? Nothing at all.
Nothing at all.
Is it going to be?
Killian will be in that film.
Killian will be in that film.
That, yeah.
And is the idea? I mean, I know Alex has kind of talked about this already. That the idea is that to be a kind of rounding off of
this. 3 films and
fantastic.
And then he needs to go make Elden Ring. Okay.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Amazing. And what's next for you? What can we expect next from you?
Nice break.
Break.
But I'm gonna. Yeah, we'll see. I'm like figuring out exactly what I want to do.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Nia DaCosta, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The brilliant Nia DaCosta there. So let's get into our conversation about Bone Temple. What you're about to hear is my conversation with Empire's Ben Travis. Now, what you're about to hear on the main podcast is the first half of our chat, where we just talk about our broad thoughts, spoiler-free. But if you want our spoilerific deep dive, where we get into the plot mechanics, the characters, and indeed the ending of the film, then sign up to our Patreon, patreon.com/evolution of horror. The full spoilerific chat about the movie is available there right now. So, a big welcome back to Ben Travis. How are you?
Hello, I am very well, thank you. I am thrilled to be starting the new year with another 28 years later film. What did we do to deserve this?
I know, right? How exciting. We had to wait so many years and then to get two within the space of a year, both written by Alex Garland. So exciting. How much did you, and just remind us, I mean, we did a big long chat together last year on 28 Years Later, but just as a little refresher, remind people your thoughts on that movie and I guess the franchise up until this point, like your general opinion on it.
Yeah, so franchise overall, I love 28 Days Later has, I mean, I haven't really reassessed this, but I would have said before 28 Years Later that 28 Days Later is my favourite Danny Boyle movie. It had a massive impact on me growing up. It was one of the first zombie films I ever watched. It was probably one of the first Danny Boyle films that I watched.
Yeah.
And then, like, revisiting it over the years, you go, oh, this is actually incredibly special and, like, super innovative. Impacted so many things that then have come up over the intervening 20-odd years. We don't get The Walking Dead in the way that we have it without 28 Days Later.
For sure.
And additional, like, appreciation, I guess, for the gonzo way that they made that movie and the digital camera shit they had going on is...
Yeah.
And all the extra resonances that you get now that we have been through a pandemic and we have seen London quiet and shut down. So I'm a huge fan of the original. I actually like 28 Weeks Later quite a lot. I think it's got some interesting stuff going on in it. All of which meant I was really looking forward to 28 Years Later last year, and I was fucking blown away by how incredibly good it was. Obviously, yeah, we did a big chat, didn't we, last year about it? So
we did.
You can get some full thoughts over there. But to me, it was full-strength Danny Boyle meets full-strength Alex Garland, really taking, like, a deep and thoughtful approach of, like, okay, if we are doing 28 Years Later, what does it mean to go 28 years later into this world? What have we been through as a nation over the last 2 decades? Which is...
Right.
The loss of the Queen and Brexit and this pandemic and so many things that, like, culturally we have undergone and maybe not, like, processed.
Yes. Yeah.
And that it's all been, like, purged through the lens of 28, which I fucking love.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, it's going to be relevant context for the Bone Temple. But understandably, the end of 28 Years Later, incredibly divisive.
Yes.
The arrival of the Jimmies. You and I watched 28 Years Later together. We were in that same screen.
That's right. And we were both just like, what the fuck? At the end
what
there?
The fuck?
Yeah.
There's not a world in which you predict that is what the end of the film is going to be. With these, like, acrobatic teens backflipping into frame and taking out the infected. And wait a second, are they all dressed as Jimmy Savile? What the fuck is going on?
Right.
Again, if we're talking about, like, wounds on the collective national psyche of the last 20 years, the Savile revelations is part of that.
Yeah.
And I loved the fact, actually, that I felt like the film just, like, slapped me in the face at the end. And I was just like, oh, I don't know how to feel, but also I feel thrilled and invigorated.
Absolutely. Well, look, 28 Years Later did an amazing job, I think, of kind of reintroducing us back into that world, but also clearly it was the first of a new story, a new 3-chapter story, right? And I think we talked about it last year, just how well that film sort of shifted in its tone and narrative midway through almost, right? And when we were introduced to Ray Fiennes' character and the Bone Temple and the way in which it suddenly became that kind of memento mori kind of theme and the way it kind of shifted into being so much more melancholy, and it was doing something very different. And then, like you say, the introduction of the Jimmy Saviles, you're like, wow, we're shifting into something very different, right? And so I don't know about you, but going into Bone Temple, I was like, I have genuinely no idea what to expect about this movie. Like, I sort of knew that it wasn't going to be your typical people running from the infected movie. Like it you could tell even by the fact that it was called the Bone Temple, right? I was thinking this is going to be something very different, and I had no idea what to expect, really. I don't know about you.
Yeah, so I had some idea of what to expect. Obviously, you've spoken to Nia DaCosta after seeing the film.
Yeah.
I have also, I did the Empire magazine feature on the Bone Temple, so I spoke to Nia DaCosta for like an hour, having not seen the film.
Oh, wow.
We had like a really good, big, long chat. I've spoken to Jack O'Connell and various people involved in the film before seeing it. And within the last week, I've seen The Bone Temple twice now, and interviewed Alfie Williams and Erin Kellyman and Chai Lewis Parry, and done like 40 minutes of spoilers with Nia DaCosta.
Oh my God. So you now are the expert on this movie. This is what I like to hear. I love it.
I wouldn't say the expert, but this movie now occupies a significant part of my brain that has not been ravished by infection. And yet going into this, right, having done the Empire feature, what's interesting is sometimes that's like tricky, doing a big magazine feature on a film, and you're trying to piece together what you think the film might be or take clues of where we might be going, because you want to present to the reader, I did a bunch of interviews, here's what we know. We want to present some stuff to you. At the same time, it is very possible to do some of those interviews, build up a picture in your head of what the film is based on what they've said, and then you see the film and you're like, oh, do you know what, that feels different to what they talked up, or it's not as good a film as the one that they talked about in the interviews.
Yes.
And so, yeah, that sometimes like sets up some weird expectations. With this one, I had an idea of what it was going to be because through doing those interviews, Nia DaCosta was quite clear on like, we're on two paths, right? We've got the Jimmies with Spike in the mix.
Yeah.
We have Dr. Kelson and his evolving relationship with Samson.
Yes.
And she was like, we're on a collision course. We have these two threads, these two very distinct stories, and they're going to collide.
Yes.
So I had an idea of what it was going to be, but I also was just scared. I was like, I'm scared for Spike in with the Jimmies. When we see him in the trailers with his little Jimmy wig,
oh, God.
You're like, oh, no, this is a bad place for Spike to be.
Yes.
And the prospect of Kelson, who we know is like a lovely character, the prospect of him confronting the Jimmies like filled me with terror, because I was like, whatever this confrontation is, it's not going to go down well.
Exactly. Well, I think that's a nice, and that's about, we're in a spoiler-free section of the chat here, so that's about all we'll reveal about the plot, I think, because I think you're right. I mean, that is essentially the setup, right? We are continuing on from these characters we were introduced to last year. We've got Spike out there in the world by himself. He runs into this group of thugs, should we call them? This kind of cult-like group known as the Jimmies, led by Jack O'Connell. And then, of course, we've got that character of what's the doctor's name again? Sorry,
Dr. Kelson.
Yeah, and then we've got that character of Dr. Kelson, played by Ray Fiennes, who we knew as well. And like you say, it's about these three or these two elements, these two worlds kind of coming together. And as such, it kind of feels, again, a bit like we kind of got two very distinct tones kind of clashing together at the same time, right? So, first of all, Ben, overall thoughts then, after all of that build-up, and you finally saw the movie, what did you think of it?
I mean, it's another absolute banger. I feel so excited in this moment. I've seen it twice, because I saw it in a press screening end of last week, and then I hadn't planned to see it again. But my mate was like, I'm going to go and see The Bone Temple on Wednesday. And I was like, I think I've got to come and join you. There are scenes in this movie that we won't discuss until we get to the spoilery stuff. But I was like, there are a couple of scenes here that I have to see with a crowd. Like, I just need to experience that in a room of people.
Yes.
I just think it's brilliant. And as a combination of these two films, I just think that it's something really special, and something that I don't think I've really experienced in my lifetime, of like a big British genre piece that is so expansive and yet so rooted in exploring, as I said before, like the fundamental fucking weirdness of what we have been through as a nation. And I thought it was interesting seeing responses around the world 28 years later, which, you know, widely well received, some controversy because it is not an obvious film that makes obvious choices. But even just seeing some of the difference in the way that like audiences in the UK responded to international audiences, where the context is just different. Like, there is just stuff for British audiences, including the Jimmy Savile stuff, that like I keep seeing like Americans dressing as the Jimmies, who clearly haven't quite, for obvious reason, picked up the context of what that is.
Yeah.
But it just shows that, like, these films and what Alex Garland is doing as the connective tissue between Danny Boyle and Nia DaCosta, they are just really, like, getting into this in a super interesting way. So I find it incredibly exciting. I loved the film. I think it's maybe slightly, like, a smidge below 28 Years Later for me. But, like, yeah, knocked out. Very, very, very happy.
I'm still in two minds about... I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I am in two minds about... Do I like this more than last year's? I don't know if I do. I mean, I think I need to let it sit with me for a bit. But what you just said there about wanting to go back and watch specific scenes again with a crowd, I feel like there are specific set pieces in this movie that were some all-timers for me across the whole franchise, right? There were particularly certain scenes set to music. There were some needle drops and some just like vibey scenes in this that are some of my favourite moments this franchise has given us, full stop. I really loved its story, its characters. It feels like there are quite a few threads going on, and yet it also feels kind of beautifully simple at the same time, I think. So I think that it feels quite streamlined, maybe, in comparison to 28 years later, which maybe felt like it was more in sort of sections, I guess. And it looks beautiful. I think we'll talk about Nia DaCosta in a minute, but I think it has its own distinct look and vibe. And I also think, holy shit, I mean, I watched this at 10 in the morning. I sat once again, I mean, this was a mistake after the zombie dong gate with the first movie. I don't know why I decided to sit on the front row of Sony's screening room again, but I did it again, Ben.
I did the same.
Did you do the same?
I had the whole place to myself. They put on a screening just for me, and I still sat front row right in the middle. I was like... Yeah.
Me too. There was one other person in there with me, and they sat on the back row, and so I might as well have been in there by myself. And I, you know, where it's sometimes, Ben, with our job, you go see a screening, you sometimes almost forget what it is you're going to see, or like it's almost like, okay, you just go through the motions. I had to get to Paddington, get to the screening room, get sat in my seat. It was very early. It was 10 in the morning, so I had to leave the house at about 8, and so I was kind of like, Rrr. And then the film started, and I was suddenly like, holy fucking shit, I suddenly remembered I'm here to watch a 28 Days Later movie, and it is so fucking violent and so extreme. And I think, again, I'd have to see this a second time and maybe think about it a bit more, but I think this might be the nastiest of the films as well. And maybe that's because it's got a particular type of human horror more than just zombie horror in this. But I found myself more tense, more disturbed, more horrified by some of the stuff that I was seeing on screen in this particular movie than I have been previously, you know?
Yeah, I think that is absolutely fair. I mean, the Jimmies are horrible characters who do deeply horrible things by their own volition, by their own choice. And I think, like, we'll save some of this for the spoiler chat, but this film really gets into what does it mean to be infected? What is that experience for the infected? What does that mean? And, you know, it has incredible empathy for, I think, all of the characters, including the Jimmies.
Yes.
And yet, it really, you know, has a lot of contrasts to it, right? The absolute depravity of what the Jimmies are doing is presented as a stark contrast to the relative peace and tranquility of Dr. Kelson's life. Yes. And so in this sense of extremes, you have some of the like sweetest and most human scenes you've had in any of these films. Yeah. And at the same time, when the Jimmies start doing their thing, it is by necessity horrendous, absolutely horrific. It goes a little bit martyrs for a while.
Genuinely,
and you don't feel great about
it. And people would have listened to the interview I just did with Nia DaCosta, but I mentioned martyrs, and she'd never seen it. I was like, well, trust me, it's up there. It's like there are certain scenes in this movie that are up there.
You're like, oh, Nick, you've not seen it? Well, don't.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. What was the crowd? Did you feel what the audience thought of the movie when you saw it?
Yeah, you could. I mean, especially I was sat with my mate who, one of the big scenes, like a big climactic scene, you already know the one I'm thinking of.
Yes.
He did basically what I did when I saw it the first time around, where I was just like squirming with joy in my chair.
Yes.
Like physically reacting with like I can't believe what I'm seeing right now, and this is wild, and I feel electrified and so surprised, especially, right, doing the feature for this for the magazine. It's a tricky one to do the interviews because you're like, I need you to tell me things. I want you to talk to me about stuff. At the same time, please don't spoil this for me because I am deeply invested in where this film is going to go. And it turns out it goes to some places that never in my wildest dreams would I have guessed what was going on in certain scenes. You're looking at pictures and bits in the trailers of like, whoa, man, there's some crazy stuff going on here. Maybe I have an idea of what that is. I did not have an idea of what those scenes were. But you could feel the electricity in the room. You really, really could. And it got lots of laughs because the film as a whole, as well as being sometimes sweet, sometimes really sick, is also very funny, and Ray Fiennes is funny. Jimmy is funny. Like, Jimmy Crystal is a funny character in a lot of ways, and I thought Nia DaCosta did a great job. I was like slightly intrigued of how are you going to approach this, because as I've said, I think these films are so much about like Britishness and the British nation and the British psyche and consciousness. And I was intrigued of like, okay, Danny Boyle is to me one of the people in my lifetime who has most explored that. Like, really the last time I think somebody explored the British consciousness in this way was the 2012 Olympic Games opening ceremony, and that was Danny Boyle.
Yeah.
So
and that feels like a lifetime ago, given how much has changed since that summer, right?
Oh my God.
You know?
Yeah, 2012 feels like a distant memory.
Yeah.
And then I was intrigued of like, okay, Nia DaCosta, American filmmaker, what resonance is that going to bring? Is that going to bring a different point of view? And I actually did ask her about that. And she, gave quite an interesting answer. She spent a lot of the time in the UK. She's really been based over here for a long time now. She basically lives over here these days.
Yeah. She said to me she used to watch EastEnders every night. So she's quite up on British pop culture and references and everything, right?
She is. And she's also just like an incredible filmmaker. And we saw, going right back to Candyman, a very thoughtful filmmaker as well. Yeah. For me, Candyman is like a flawed film, but it is so ambitious in its idea. It's almost like ideas first, everything else second. So I think actually she was a really good fit for this.
Yeah, I agree. And I completely agree with everything you said. I think Candyman was a really impressive film. Almost you respect it more than you might enjoy it, as a horror film compared to the original, I think. But I agree with you about how interesting all the ideas were in it, and also just how beautiful it looks too. Nia DaCosta is an artist, right? And you feel the artistry in what she makes. And how did you find this movie? Has a very different vibe to the Danny Boyle one, right? She was not interested in filming on iPhone rigs, right? She's like, no, I used my beautiful Alexa camera, so it's more, it looks more lush, doesn't it? I would say. Like, how did you find the general kind of look and vibe of this movie compared to last year's?
Yeah, I mean, I still think it's a beautiful looking film, and it is very well presented. I think maybe that is a reason why it's a smidge below the Boyle one for me, because the Boyle craziness that nobody else does, and frankly I wouldn't really want anyone else to attempt, is like an extra just textural frisson in that previous film that I'm like, who else is intercutting the like medieval bows and arrows and the soldiers going off to war, and then those random like really red shots of all the infected scrabbling around in the forest, and just presenting you with this like almost patchwork of imagery and blasting that at you in the most Danny Boyle way. I felt like so swept up by some of that stuff, and you don't get that here. But what you do get is a very sure handle on all of the characters and how that impacts what she's doing with the camera. Like, she spoke to me about how she had a very clear vision when she read the script and saw the very distinct worlds that this film takes place in, that okay, the world of the Jimmies is insane and violent, and I'm going to use a lot of handheld, and we're going to be really up close in the mix with them and feel the danger of them. And then when you're with Kelson, you feel the serenity. It's lots of gliding cameras and wide shots that you just see him in all the spires of the Bone Temple, just living and being free, and you feel that through the camera work. So it's more subtle, really, than what Danny Boyle was doing.
Yes.
But I really like that she didn't just try and do a Danny Boyle impression.
No, it really feels like its own thing, doesn't it? And also, the thing that worried me was, and you'll know this from being a fan of, or being up on Marvel and all of that kind of stuff, I was worried that this was going to suffer from middle chapter syndrome. Do you know what I mean? Like Age of Ultron syndrome, where it was going to be.
Don't come for Age of Ultron, Mike.
I thought it was going to be juggling so much and having to do so much to carry us from one world, from one story to the next, whilst also doing its own thing, whilst also having a new director who had never taken on this franchise before. In a way, I thought there was a lot going against it, actually, as a film. And actually, I think, again, there is something just so beautifully simple about this movie, and it feels very much like its own self-contained movie. Like it goes on its own journey, its own beginning, middle, and end, which I really love.
Yeah, because if you'd have told me big picture-wise, obviously, yes, I absolutely want 3 28 years later movies when they say, Danny and Alex actually both want to do 28 now, and it's going to be a trilogy. Obviously, the answer to that is yes. But also, if you said to me, they're going to do the first film, and then it, at the end, has a teaser for the characters in the next one, then the second one, you're kind of following these side characters, and you're sort of with them, and it's sort of a separate story to the first one, and then you're probably going to come back to some of the other stuff from the first. I would have been man, I'm tired of all this franchise shit, basically. And I've seen it in our audience as well, writing for Empire, that a few years ago, a film would come out and the director would be I've got ideas for sequels and a prequel and a spin-off, and people were excited by that. That it was this is a mode of storytelling that people are really enticed by. And I've really seen that shift to people being I just want you to make one good movie at a time and follow it from there.
Yeah.
And so everything that the Bone Temple is, it effectively is a side quest with side characters from the previous film, teed up by a tag at the end of the last one. And it is fucking brilliant, and also feels like an integral chapter in Spike's story, because Spike is still here. He is not really a major presence in this, and yet I think a really important thing in the Bone Temple is, even though Spike might not be saying loads of things or actively doing loads of things, just watching him exist in this world under the influence of these other people,
right,
I think is really important for his development.
Yeah, that is really interesting, because I was going to ask you about that, whether you missed some of those characters from the original, right? Because you're right. I mean, even though Alfie Williams is in the majority of the film, he doesn't do as much as he did in the first movie. We don't have Aaron Taylor-Johnson in this one either, or really any of those characters back on his little island. And so you're right, it almost does feel a bit like a side quest, doesn't it? It almost feels like you could have gone from the end of the first film to where he's at the end of this movie, in a way. But I think you're right about that too, is that he's probably done a lot of learning and growing in various ways throughout this particular... He goes through some shit in this movie. I felt for poor Spike in this movie,
Get him into therapy. Yes. If there's a therapist out there,
yes,
get Spike in front of that therapist, please. Oh my God. Poor kid.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about, and again, we'll talk about this more in spoilers, but what about as a zombie movie? As a movie that, like you said, 28 Days Later was so important to the zombie genre, has it sort of stopped being a zombie apocalypse story by this point, would you say?
I think it is, in a way, much less interested in that. And yet I also think it's probably about as interested in that as 28 Years Later was. And it's more interested in the world that the zombie outbreak or infection outbreak creates and what that means on the ramifications of how people live in that world. So they are there, they're a presence, and I like how that becomes like a character note of, you see the Jimmies, like, infected are running at them, and they are so nonchalant, they are so unbothered, they're like, quick dodge, slice of the neck, roll away, everyone's fine. We see other survivors who, like, one or two infected, that is a terrifying thing for them. We kind of are witnessing how all these different people live and exist in this world, and so it doesn't work without the zombies. And also, we'll get into this again, but like, it maybe unpicks more about what it means to be infected, about like, what is this infection then? It gets more into the nitty-gritty of that in a way that I think is really interesting, and again, could be dodgy territory, could be like, don't even go there, why do we need to do this? But actually, it's making a really clever point about all of that. But at the same time, would you say a vast majority of this film is like zombies attacking and people having to run away or fight them? Like, not really.
No. And that's not to say that it doesn't, like I said at the beginning, it still feels like a horror film in some ways. And I asked Nia DaCosta about that as well, about, you know, was this a difficult story to make into a genre film when so much of it was quite kind of character-based and meditative and all of that? And she said, and she said, as a horror fan, she said, I was tempted to, and I did add in a few extra scares here and there. And again, I think they all work, though. There are some genuine scares. And again, sitting on the front row of a screening room by yourself, I was leaping out of my seat and my heart was racing in a couple of places. So it definitely still has that genre thrill for people seeking it, I would say, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. There was a couple of jump scares that actually really got me. I was like, I'm pleased I'm in this cinema on my own and nobody saw me absolutely leap out of the chair right now.
Exactly.
And as we spoke about last time, a really important part of the scare factor in these films is the fast-running infected, because it adds this level of danger that, like, when you do see the infected, if you are not ready to take them on, there's a frantic panic to it. And there was incredible sequences in 28 Years Later, kind of in that vein.
Yeah.
Absolutely in the original as well. This one maybe does less of that, but we've seen that before, and we've seen it like 6 months ago. So,
well, there's an amazing, and this is a very, very minor spoiler, but there is an amazing sequence when a young girl is walking through a field and an infected comes running and screaming at her. She barely flinches, pulls out a knife, slits the throat of the infected, and carries on walking, right? And that is where we're at now in this world. It's like, these people are used to being in amidst the infected. They know how to deal with it. That's not the biggest threat anymore necessarily, right? And that, I think that's really interesting, because we are 28 years into this world by this point, you know? So things have changed. The threats have changed.
Definitely.
You know?
But to do that as well without signalling to the audience of like, the infected don't really matter anymore. There is a danger of that, to say to the audience like, well, you don't really need to be scared when the infected turn up. But again, different characters have very different responses to those things. And it says something about those characters, how they respond to those situations. So it's such a careful, like, tightrope walk.
It is. I love it. Well, there you go. Well, before we get into spoilers, I'll just end with, we're recording this before opening weekend. And is the plan, Ben, as far as you're aware, is it still that we don't know for definite if we're getting the third movie yet until this movie does well in the box office, essentially?
We now know it's happening. Hey! So a couple of weeks before Christmas, back in December, there were not public screenings, there were like media screenings, big media screenings of The Bone Temple. I think they wanted just to get it in front of people and let people see it, because they must have seen it's a banger. Nia did it, Alex did it, they done it. So they got it in front of people. There were big rave reactions on social, and then the next day it was either Deadline or The Hollywood Reporter, one of the major like trade publications who can really be trusted with this stuff, were like, it's going ahead. Alex Garland is writing the screenplay.
Amazing.
Cillian Murphy is back, which Danny Boyle has been very open about from the beginning. He's spoken in terms that even Nia DaCosta's like, why is Danny Boyle talking so much about Cillian Murphy being back in these? So the third one, it is happening, and I mean, again, we won't do spoilers yet, but seeing how this one ends, how could you not want a third one after this, right?
Yeah.
Like, they've got to do it. And I think the reaction to the first one made a really solidly decent amount of money. It wasn't like a crazy no-brainer success that absolutely will do a third one, but it really, did good, solid business and got really strong responses as well. And Bone Temple, I think at the moment, is the best reviewed film of all of them on Rotten Tomatoes.
Wow.
I mean, I don't love Rotten Tomatoes as a metric, but as a general, finger to the wind, the wind is blowing in the right direction. So it'll be intriguing to see if people do turn up for this one, where all the marketing is it's a weird one.
Yes.
Here's a bunch of crazy characters doing crazy shit.
Yes.
Who knows if people will go for it? But also, there's not much competition right now.
There's not, unless you want to go see the Killer Chimp movie, Primate. There's not a hell of a lot else to go see in terms of genre films. So, I agree. And I hope people go see it. It is great, really, really good. And I think particularly to see in the cinema, particularly to see with a crowd, there are high highs and dark lows in this movie, and really, really fun. So there you go. Well, let's finish by getting into some spoilers then. And there we go. If you want to hear more, if you want to hear our spoilerific conversation about Bone Temple, where Ben and I talk about specific plot points, some of the best scenes, some of the themes of the film, and of course the ending of the film, then sign up to our Patreon, patreon.com/evolution of horror. In the meantime, we'll be back next Friday for another regular episode of the Evolution of Horror.